I've gotten a few questions over on the Discord and in the YouTube comments and added me at Twitter. So I figured this is an important topic to some of you guys, but like you all seem to want to know what a chapter is, what an issue is, what a volume is, an episode, etc., etc. What are all these little like segments of story and like how do I work with them? And I think I can address this because for the most part, they're all sort of the same thing in practice, honestly. There's only a few very slight differences, and how you work with them is basically the same. A chapter, an issue, a volume, they're all story chunks that seem to have sort of what I would call soft endings. Unless they are, of course, like the last chapter in your series, then they'd have the total ending of your story, in which case they wouldn't just be like a soft little pause sort of ending. And a chapter, issue, volume, episode, they all serve the purpose of giving a reader a break and giving yourself a break between chunks of story, because it's very hard to put out comics all the time, so it's nice to get them out in little chunks. So yeah, it's good to give your story out in little chunks rather than giving the entirety of the story at once. And when you're forming something that will have sort of a soft, more incomplete sort of ending, this means that you need to close off small inner plot arcs of the specific chapter, scene, or whatever that you're working with, while leaving enough room for there to be interest for your reader to engage and continue on with later. When it comes down to each specific one and their differences, the main differences is context more than anything. An issue, chapter, and episode are basically the same thing. An episode is typically used for vertical scrolling comics and like the webtoon format and other sort of non-traditional formats of comics. Issue tends to refer to a small section for sale, whether that's an ebook or a physical book, and a chapter is a more general term, though it tends to be used like within a volume, and volumes themselves are outliers, and they're kind of a collection of issues, chapters, or episodes. That's sort of what your volumes are. And one more thing I'd say about chapters is that you don't need them. Like, you don't need chapters, you don't need issues. The only one that you absolutely need, probably, like, unless you're on webtoons, in which case you probably need episodes. But in the case of like absolute necessity, volumes will be one that you'll definitely work with, especially if you're printing, and especially if whatever you're printing is going to be a long running story, in which case maybe you'll never run into a volume if you write just like a short story, but I guess that's the only reason you won't run into any of this. So when it comes to the size of each of these, it's really, really, really up to you. Like, there's no law that tells you how big each of these things have to be. Like, unless you're adhering to very specific rules for some sort of very specific context, you can have your chapter be as long as you want it, and you don't even have to have chapters. Like, Magpie doesn't have chapters. I just work with volumes, and I used to work with issues with it, and that's about it. However, there are some guidelines that I could give you. Issues are typically 22 pages. Again, I've made them bigger. Issue 2 of 9 Point is going to be like 50-ish pages. You just need to kind of pay attention that if you're going to make a traditional comic book and you want it to be all folded up, your page count will be in multiples of 4. So keep that in mind. Just keep in mind the formatting of a Saddle Stitch book is just like pages that have 4 pages because they get folded and then they have a front and a back. So each page has 4. So just keep that in mind when you're formatting everything. For chapters and episodes, I keep them in that kind of range too. You can go bigger or lower, whatever works for you, because I don't like, the chapters are so general, it doesn't really matter. So like, I've seen anywhere from like 100-page chapters to like thousands of pages, but like anywhere between like maybe 20 to like 50 seems kind of reasonable for me for a chapter, depending on how big the work is. If you're doing a webcomic, it might be good to kind of think of this in terms of your schedule and how you want to put things out, because you may want to like ramp up near the ends of chapters, or you might want to take a break after each chapter. Just keep that in mind. They can be good for scheduling more than anything else. I think that would be a good use for a chapter, is taking a pause, taking a break, using a period where it's okay for your readers to take a break and for you to take a break. That would be a good way to use chapters to your advantage. So I guess that moves me on to volumes, and well, they're unique, and they're especially unique to comic creators. Unlike in novels, you don't really need a tight, contained story in your volume. You can totally do that. That's perfectly fine. That's cool. That's reasonable. That's awesome. But you're not bad if you don't have a complete story. The reason this is literally comes down to kind of cost, because comics tend to run really long and take a lot more pages to like get their point across than like a novel, where you can kind of like shrink text as needed. It's okay to have a soft ending to your volume. And the question might be like, why not just wait until the end of an arc to end a volume? It really comes down to just like what the books are like. Big books are really, really expensive, and like prohibitively so. So once you're past the 200 page mark, like books start getting really expensive for you. And especially if you have a color comic. So 100 to 150 pages tends to be a really nice sweet spot. And like, obviously you can make money selling kind of a big expensive book, but that's going to be harder to sell to people, because like, if it's a new thing that they've never heard of, they might not buy your $40, $50 book. Just think about art books and how much they cost, and how you typically only buy an art book because you really, really like the art that's in it. And so, yeah, just think about that. You want to keep your books kind of smaller just for cost savings and just to give people a chance to try out your books. So yeah, stick to 100 to 150 for your own sanity's sake. And I say this as I stare at my 300 page 9-point volumes that I'm planning out. Like, what is your problem? Wow, Bones, don't do that. 9 Points my book. We have it in issue form though, so maybe that'll make up for my bad decision making. Anyways, with all that in mind, like, how then do you pick where your chapters end, where your issues begin? What about volumes? Like, how do you determine 100 to 150 pages? Where the cutoff point? Where the cutoff point? Unless you plan on every issue, chapter, volume having a very tight storyline or ending at certain points, just write your story. Don't worry about it. Think about this stuff totally later, because it's so easy to change. Where your chapters, issues, and volumes end are by far the easiest editing things you can do that kind of shape your story in different ways, just where you put your pauses, basically. So don't worry about it until the end, where you can actually look at your story as a whole and think, okay, this chunk of story kind of fits together. This is a nice ending for it, which leads into a good beginning. Look for points kind of around pivotal plot moments. Like, start dividing your script up evenly and look for scenes around those 100 to 150 marks that end with kind of strong, intriguing plot threads that come at the end of different plot threads. Look for places that are kind of pivotal, and don't cut your story off with a cliffhanger that is immediately answered in the next volume. I swear. I didn't have an example, but as I'm saying this, I'm literally thinking of The Hobbit and how the second Hobbit movie ends with this huge cliffhanger that literally just, I thought, okay, I didn't read The Hobbit, but I was not expecting the third Hobbit movie to be what it was, and it totally was a disappointing thing. So please, if everything ties up in the end, like, let's say, for example, that your one volume ends with a whole bunch of people fighting a dragon and stuff, and it's super crazy, and it's like all building up, and then like the dragon flies away to destroy a village, and then you cut off. Like, you're gonna figure that your next volume is gonna be about fighting that dragon and protecting the village or whatever, because that's the promise you're leaving for your next volume. But meanwhile, if you start your volume with the dragon immediately being killed and then a completely other plot shows up out of nowhere about some sort of war or something, like, that's a bad idea. Instead, end your story with the dragon being killed and then have hints that this war thing is going to happen. So then you say, like, hey, our next volume is going to deal with this kind of plot aspect. We're going to, like, have a progression here. Don't do cliffhangers that are immediately resolved. It's super frustrating and totally not a rant about something that I'm bothered by at all. Don't worry about it. You know, if that's how you want to do your story, you can do it that way, but I'm not going to be happy. Yeah, so yeah, but find points that, like, find an endpoint that sort of suggests what the larger aspect of your next volume is going to be, rather than try and, like, rather than putting a soft ending or, like, an ending to a certain plot arc right after you take a break, because it just will kill your momentum and frustrate people. I can think of other stories that have done this, so just try not to do that. This all probably sounds a bit vague and scary, but you're probably not going to mess up, and if you do, it's not that big of a deal. You know, you can just learn. Part of the reason it's so hard to explain is that pacing is a very, very intuitive process, and you learn it through practice. And picking where your chapters and where your issues begin and end is, like, a really great practice on how to do pacing. Just take the plunge and start chopping up your story. Like, if you're just starting on this stuff, it's okay to mess up. It's okay to do the thing with the dragon that annoyed me. But, like, it's fine to do that. Don't worry about it. If you're just starting out, once you're a professional, then you're going to get the sass, but, like, don't worry about it in the meantime. In the end, it's up to you to determine what feels right, and you're not going to make everyone happy with your story, no matter what. Just keep in mind that whenever you're ending a story, for whatever reason, you're just doing a pause for you and the reader, and make sure that you have your promises set up for, like, what your next volume is going to be, and you're good. For the most part, if you're writing your scenes well, if you're writing your dialogue well, if you're writing everything well, most scenes will lend to a good next volume. For the most part, whenever I'm picking, like, where a chapter should end or where the new Magpie volume should begin, like, I have quite a few different scenes that I could end on that would be totally acceptable, as long as I don't, like, end in the middle of a fight scene. You're fine. You're most likely fine. Like, there's some cases where it probably would be acceptable to end in a fight scene. Just assuming that you've ended the main arc of that fight scene and you're moving into, like, a second arc, like, maybe the first half of this fight scene is where everything is going poorly and everything is, like, losing, and then, like, we end the volume sad devastation, and then we start the next volume up building up. But, like, the reason that would be acceptable is because the next volume would then be about rebuilding and winning. If you're going to end in the middle of something, it better suggest that it's going to be a large half of the next volume. So yeah, just pay attention to what you're saying, because your ending will speak volumes to what your next volume will be. Okay, so I'm just rambling now. I hope this was entertaining. I forgot to mention that we're doing the 24-hour live stream tomorrow. Heck, dang, there's a ending for sure. I went on quite the adventure yesterday. So, okay, this is the ramble section for my rambly friends. But I forgot to put out the video yesterday. I went to get a haircut because I wanted to get my haircut before the stream. I always forget to do my haircut before, like, conventions and stuff, and I keep putting off and off until it's the convention, and then I'm like, oh no, well, I guess I'm not getting a haircut. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna march down to the haircutting place and get it all cut. So I did that, and then I kind of messed around at the mall for a little bit because I got a haircut at the mall. I'm that guy. I got ice cream because, And then I went to Green Earth, which is like the hippie store. I don't know if anyone outside of Canada has Green Earth. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I literally don't know sometimes when I talk about something whether you guys have it. But it's like a hippie store with a whole bunch of really expensive like cult stuff and like crystals and all that kind of jazz. And the specific Green Earth that I went to was shutting down, so like it was like 50 to 80% off everything. So I got a bunch of stuff. I couldn't help myself. Well, anyways, I went to the mall, then I went to Walmart, and then I got like a whole bunch of puzzles and a wallet, because I need a wallet because I have cards now. Anyways, I did all that. And then I went home, got all the videos out in a panic, and yeah, that went well. And then we had to do taxes, so we got our taxes done. So we went to the tax place, and we had like a new accountant guy, and by new I mean like he clearly was like very, very new. Like this was his first tax season, and he was like kept on getting like his supervisor to come in and be like, what where do I file this? Like, because okay, I came in with my Ursula had her T4s in, and she was like, okay, here these are, and that was good. And then I throw out my big stack of self-employed nonsense, and I didn't calculate any of my expenses. I made them do that because I'm just like, I don't have time to calculate my expenses. Here's all my receipts. And they were very confused about how to file them. It was quite a mess. It took a long time, but we got it done. And we got it done same day. So that was 10 out of 10. After that, we went back to Green Earth and we bought more stuff because I couldn't carry it all home. So I was like, Ursula, we need to go back and get you things. So she got like a necklace, and we got a bunch of picture frames for like dogs. They have all these little sassy dog sayings on them. They're like 10 out of 10. So that's what I did yesterday. It was quite fun. Yeah, so tomorrow is the 24-hour live stream. We're basically set up for it. I'm excited. We're going to do 24 pages in 24 hours. For the most part, I'm going to do nothing, honestly. I'm going to wake up, do my script, and then Ursula's going to panic for the rest of humanity. That's kind of what it's like to be a comic artist versus a comic writer. Like, I'll be honest, it's very quick, especially when you become really good at writing. It's just like, woo, done. Comic scripts are easy. 10 out of 10. Done. I'm 10 out of 10ing a lot more than usual. But yeah, I'm going to engage the chat. My voice is gonna die. And we have 2 videos coming out tomorrow still. So like while watching a 24-hour stream, Ursula still did her comic vlog early, and I have the OC story time tomorrow because I keep not being available for OC story times, and that's going to be a fun thing because I'm going to talk about Honeywell stuff, which is the novel Kickstarter thing that I'm going to be doing in April. April 15th is when we're going to launch that, so that's exciting. So I'm going to talk about some of the characters in that, and hopefully I can get you hype about it, and maybe we can fund it. That'll be fun. Okay, I'm gonna go actually record that video right now. Ursula still hasn't done the art for it, but, you know, she's a busy girl. We're gonna get these comics done. Heck yeah. Love you all. See you guys tomorrow. I hope I don't die.